We are entering one of the most tumultuous times in human history, I believe. All the graphs, the demographic cliffs show it. You had the cultural decay, the laziness of the West, the militants, the weapons all over the world, the Pentagon, the Ministry of Defense. They say 2016 to 2022 is going to be over-the-top wild. So don't strap yourselves in. You don't want to be a spectator in this. You want to be involved. The worst place to be is a spectator. This is not a spectator sport. So there's my intro. He joins us till the end of the hour. Then Anthony Gucciardo will be hosting the live fourth hour. And I really appreciate our routine guest who comes on every few weeks now, Harry Dent, author of The Demographic Cliff, a former top guy, of course, over there doing big corporate turnarounds. I like that, not just takeovers, for Bain Capital, HarryDent.com, Harvard Business School graduate, and more. I'm not going to go over the rest of it. People know who he is. And he's also offering a deal still where you just pay the shipping and get his book free. That's how much he wants to get it out for you. It's like $4.95 or something. I know he loses money on that. The book costs that to just get it into your hands, The Demographic Cliff. Okay, we've gone over the charts. We've covered a lot of that. The point is what you've said is basically happening just as you said it would, just as your last predictions came eerily true. Tell us what's happening currently and then what you expect now that the optics are closer and clearer with the electron microscope, what the next shoe to drop is, Mr. Dent.
Well, again, I've been looking at China, #1, because they have the greatest bubble in the world. They have overbuilt their economy for 12 to 15 years in the future, massive migration into cities where people don't really have jobs. They have them building stuff for nobody. And that's what they've been doing for 15 years. I have never seen a bubble to compare to this. So I'm saying, look, we have a bubble around the world in demographic spending, which keeps declining in more countries. And we can predict this by country. Japan was the first to peak, and then the US, and now Europe. But we also have the greatest debt bubble in modern history, 2 to 4 times what we've seen back in the roaring 20s. Last time we had a debt bubble. And all we need, like in 2008 with the subprime crisis, is a trigger to cause this debt bubble to reset and deleverage, or what I call a financial detox. And this is happening. I've been looking at China, #1, because it had the greatest stock bubble in the shortest period of time, with the least sophisticated investors who were jumping out of the real estate bubble there to get into the stock bubble, and now it's collapsing. And the government is doing the same thing, Alex, it did in 1929 when the U.S. stock bubble started to burst. Both bubbles went down 42% in 2.5 months, and then the government steps in and starts buying its own stock market to try to prop it up, and it only lasts about 4 months before the bubble collapse and get worse. You cannot stop a bubble from bursting once you create it. The only way you can stop a bubble is not to create it in the first place, and nobody gets that. We are in a bubble around the world. Commodities we've been predicting for years have already collapsed. Nobody thought oil would be at $32 a barrel. We said it would be $20 to $30 a barrel years ago. Nobody thought that the U.S. bubble would burst in real estate in 2005. We said it'll burst. Now it's going to burst more. So investors and people need to say, look, we've had this great bubble. It's been artificially stimulated by governments around the world, especially the Fed here in the United States. Take your gains from the bubble and turn it back into cash and liquidity so you can survive this crash that's going to happen. It is going to be worse. And we just said this in our January newsletter. 2016 is going to go down, I think, is the worst year for the stock market, not since 2008, not since 2001, since 1931, because this crash is going to happen rapidly, and it's starting in China, and that's what I've been looking for. I finally told people late last year, gosh, the thing I've been looking for in the last couple of years is for a major bubble to burst, not just oil, which was first, but the second one is China's bubble bursting, and they're not going to be able to stop.
So you're saying we're facing another Great Depression generally, or the same numbers in the stock market?
Yeah, actually, we're facing a bigger crash than 2008, which was about 55% in 17 months. I think we're going to see 70% in the next year, year and a half, and ultimately a little more than that down the road. We are going to see a Great Depression. We started to see the Great Depression, which I forecast back in 2007 and 8. We started to see that.
So you're saying the new Great Depression is basically months away?
Yes, I think it's going to happen between this year, 2016, and 2022.
And they're getting ready to take the guns on top of it. I tell you, this is a recipe for just explosions. Please continue.
Yeah, I mean, and again, people don't realize, nobody's seen this happen in their lifetime. The last time we had a bubble burst in debt and financial assets, stocks, commodities, real estate, everything, was in the early 30s, and the stock market went down 89% in 2.5 years. Real estate went down 26%, 61% in New York, never came back for decades. Stocks didn't come back for 25 years. This is something major. You have to get out of the way of this. It's a matter of survival. And then when these bubbles burst, whether it's real estate in New York or beachfront property in Florida or anywhere else, you're going to be able to buy stuff at rates you will not believe if you protect your wealth now and wait until the crash happens.
I understand you're about surviving and thriving in bad times, but getting back to your demographic cliff, all your charts, the things you used at Bain to be able to successfully predict things, and all your best-selling books, specifically, I mean, because at a certain point it does get down to tea leaves on exact times. 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. I mean, we'll be in a Great Depression. They'll be telling us everything's great, like they tell us Obamacare is free. But how deep will this have to get before they admit it's a depression? I mean, obviously, most third world countries are already in a depression. They're in flames. So there is a global depression. It's just not evenly distributed. But how long until it hits here? How bad will it be distributed, say, here versus Australia versus China versus Europe versus Russia? Where are the worst places? Where are the best places?
Okay, first of all, we've been waiting for a long time to see. I mean, the governments have been keeping this bubble going by printing trillions of dollars, like $10, $12 trillion in the last several years. They've been filling in the downturn. They didn't do that in the 1930s. So in the 1930s, the stock market peaked in 1929 when demographics would have said it would, and it just went down. Well, no, they've kept this bubble going. But we've been looking for the final signs where I call the smart money is exiting the market. When this happens, when the largest companies like Google and Apple and Netflix and Amazon are going straight up, and most companies, 80% of the companies, are going down. The average company in the stock industry is down 20% right now, while these big companies are making new highs at unbelievable valuations. That is the sign that the bubble's finally peaking. And so I think this bubble's going to burst. It's starting to burst now. To have December and January be the worst in decades is a sign that something's wrong. This happened in 2001. It happened in 2007 and 8. This is a sign that something's wrong, and I think you're going to see not a correction, not a 10, 20% correction that the most conservative analysts are calling for. I think you're going to see a major crash in the next year.
Well, you've been right over and over and over again. It's sickening feeling, because I don't want you to be right, but I mean, you're one of the most accurate people out there. I'm not just saying that. People can all witness it. I wish you were wrong. What do you say, just because I have to do this, to the naysayers, and they even do this in mainstream media, New York Times, oh, we're fear porn. Oh, we're going to cause a crash by saying all this. That's like saying, well, you caused Bernie Madoff to go under because you pointed out he was a fraud. The fraudsters are okay. The derivative sellers are okay. Those of us that point out historical trends, we're bad. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, I was the most bullish economist in all of U.S. history from the late 80s forward, because I saw this massive baby boom coming. They're the largest generation in history, the largest since the American Revolution back 250 years ago. And these people were going to predictably cause the greatest boom and bubble.
Yeah, you want to be bullish, but I mean, the fact is, this is the season of the bear.
Well, yeah, exactly. But we had that boom. And the baby boom first peaked in Japan. That's why I called my book The Demographic Cliff. The first baby boom to peak was in Japan in the late 80s, the mid 90s. They fell off the cliff. And look at Japan ever since. They've been down. Their stock market's still 55% off their highs. Real estate's down 60%, never recovered. And their stock market was down 80% or worse. Japan has just gone through what the rest of the world, the U.S. went through it next. And now Europe is going to hit it. And everybody thinks Germany's going to hold up the Eurozone. And Germany has the worst demographics of any single country in the next decade, and nobody sees
And
Germany.
I don't think giant third world rape gangs are going to replace them.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, you can't fight demographics, but the worst thing Alex, is that when times are good, especially when the Fed jumps in and makes interest rates low and tells everybody to buy a house whether they can afford it or not, you get these bubbles in speculation and real estate and stocks and debt. And this debt bubble is when you count all the unfunded liabilities for healthcare and Social Security and government debt and private debt. And people worry about 18 trillion in government debt. That is the least of our problems.
I agree.
We have so much more debt, like 8 times our GDP at the minimum.
Well, how many quadrillions are there in derivatives?
70 trillion just in that. I mean, and derivatives are total speculation. They're supposed to be insurance against bonds and stuff. There's no collateral. Real insurance has collateral behind it. So this is just another way to speculate, another way for Wall Street to say, oh, you don't have to worry about all these risks and bubbles. We've got it insured. You got it insured by who? Speculators and 30 times leverage. As soon as something goes wrong, they're broke. They're not going to be able to stand behind these.
Demographically, too, how bad will crime get during a depression?
Okay. I look back in the 1930s, Alex, and any time in history, crime and unemployment are directly correlated, and stock crashes and suicides are directly correlated. So crime and homicides were the highest in 1933 when unemployment was the highest in the Great Depression, and suicides were the highest in mid to late 1932 when the stock market bottomed. So you're going to see civil unrest. You're going to see rising crime, but it's going to come from rising unemployment after this big bubble's been built. And if you think it's bad in the United States, imagine 500 million, I said 500 million migrants, uneducated migrants from rural areas in China that only in the last 15 years have moved into cities, and they're building stuff for nobody. And when that building boom starts, what are these people going to do? You're going to have 500 million people in Chinese cities unemployed.
China already had more than 50 million people, it's estimated, since Mao took over, starved to death. Can you imagine the starvation this time?
Yeah. I mean, I worry. I don't worry. Is Europe has worse demographics than the United States? You said, where's it going to be the worst? East Asia, Japan. But in the United States, we have much more income inequality, and China has this massive migration that's never been properly assimilated. And I hate to say, the one thing about Europe is they have their immigrants, especially the Muslims, are not as integrated, nowhere near as here. So you're going to see, I think, civil unrest on a level we haven't seen in our lifetime. And I hate to say that, but it's just like,
it's true. We're sitting on top of Road Warrior time bomb. Good God. We are, oh my, it's just, and I mean, it's clear we're steaming towards it, whether it's a month, 6 months, a year. When we come back, I want to specifically when you think they're going to be able to stop, denying it. You answered most of the question. I appreciate that. But Mr. Dent, when is it going to be clear? Because, man, they can mind control the public, folks. You can have 1,000 German women raped, and they'll say it didn't happen. So you can have a depression, and they'll tell you, you didn't build your business. I mean, this is the age of 2 + 2 = 5. The establishment obviously scurrying around getting ready for political upheaval and trying to exacerbate it as much as they can, I guess, to use the crisis to get even more power. But getting past all that, what are we going to do individually? Looking at the United States and the rest of the world, they're pretty much signaling now that things are in big trouble, global implosion. If you say it's as bad as the Great Depression, you add all the bigger populations, all the fact that Tower of Babel, you were just mentioning, people don't get along as well. We don't have more homogeneous populations anywhere, it's in other parts of the world as well. What does that signal, and what's the time frame?
Well, again, I think the worst year is going to be 2016, early 2017, the next year or a little more. I think that's when the stock crash is going to hit the hardest, just like it did in 2008. It happened in 17 months. And 80% of that stock crash happened in 5 months between June and early November of 2008. It's going to be like that. Stocks are going to get hit the worst, the fastest. Real estate is going to take years to come down. Businesses are going to go under. So if you've got a business and you're thinking of retiring, you should sell your business now, or you should hunker down to survive and know that if you are leaner and meaner than your competitors, you're going to come out of this ahead. If you got stocks, you should sell them. I mean, people say, oh, but I got Procter & Gamble and it's got a high dividend. I don't care. Even in the Great Depression, companies like Procter & Gamble went down 50, 60, 70, 80%. And some companies stopped paying the dividend. So if you want a dividend, get a 30-year Treasury bond. That is the safest thing you can buy. And people keep saying the U.S. dollar is going to go down. No, we're the best house in a bad neighborhood. And that's been proven over several years. And we've been saying that as well. So get safe, get in stuff, just protect your wealth. The key to prospering in a deflationary downturn like this, which only comes once in a lifetime, like the 1930s, and nobody's alive to tell us about that, is that you protect your wealth and then reinvest after the bubbles burst.
Let me expand on that. What about more speculative things? What do you see, because Bitcoin's up right now, what do you see happening deeper into this with things like Bitcoin?
You know, no, Bitcoin, I think, is the beginning of something in the future, but it's not established yet, and it's just as volatile as gold. I wouldn't be buying Bitcoin, and I wouldn't be buying gold. Gold did great in the 70s when inflation was the trend, but with deflation and debt deleveraging the trend, gold keeps going down. And I've got reports on this off the charts. It's just unbelievable that people don't understand. People think gold is a crisis hedge. It's an inflation hedge, and we're not dealing with inflation. How could we have such low inflation after $12 trillion was printed around the world by central banks? It's because they're printing money to fight deflation, and deflation is not gold's ally. It's not stocks or real estate. The only thing that does well in deflation is high-quality, long-term Treasury bonds and AAA corporate bonds. That's the only two things that did well in the 1930s. Everything else went down. And that's what I have to keep telling people, Alex, that this is not like the 1970s or other recessions we've had where some things go up, some things go down. In a bubble burst like this, everything goes down except for the primary.
Sure. So by what time next year will it be evident? Or this year?
I think between now and July, you're going to see the first big crash, not a small. We've only seen small crashes thus far around China and oil. And we've been warning. Those are the two things to look at. When oil prices go down, watch out. And when China stocks go down, watch out. I think you're going to see the first crash by July. And I think you're going to see the worst of it by late 2016, early to mid 2017. It will last beyond that up and down, but you're going to see the worst there. And so this is the year to protect yourself. After that, it's going to be easier to deal with this.
All right, Mr. Dent, HarryDent.com. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend. Thank you for the time. Coming up, 4th hour, Infowars.com/show. Stay with us. We're taking on the globalists, ladies and gentlemen.